The old mansion groaned, settling into the night. Its ancient timbers, warped by decades of storms and seasons, seemed to sigh with the weight of memories too heavy to bear. The moon hung low, casting a silvery glow over the crumbling stone and tangled ivy that clung to the walls like desperate fingers. Every window was a dark, unblinking eye, watching, waiting, remembering. Inside, Mac listened, and each creak and sigh of the timbers felt like a whispered warning. The house spoke in a language of groans and shudders, a secret code only the truly attentive could decipher. He strained his ears, trying to separate the ordinary sounds of an old house from something more sinister, something that might be lurking just out of sight. Dust motes danced in the pale moonlight filtering through grimy windows, while shadows stretched like grasping claws across the worn Persian rug. The air was thick with the scent of old paper and forgotten dreams, and every surface seemed to hum with the energy of the past. The moonlight, cold and indifferent, revealed the faded grandeur of the room, ornate moldings, a fireplace choked with ash, and furniture draped in white sheets like ghosts at rest. He was alone, or so he thought. The silence pressed in on him, heavy and absolute, broken only by the distant ticking of a grandfather clock somewhere deep within the house. Each tick was a reminder of time passing, of lives once lived here, of secrets buried beneath layers of dust and neglect. Mac nursed his drink, the amber liquid doing little to settle the unease in his gut. The house was always like this, an oppressive weight on his chest. He tried to convince himself that it was just the isolation, the echo of his own footsteps, the way the wind rattled the window panes. But tonight, the feeling was stronger, more insistent, as if the house itself was aware of his presence and resented the intrusion. Tonight, however, felt different. A prickling sensation ran down his spine, almost like he was being watched. The hairs on his arms stood up, and he found himself glancing over his shoulder, half expecting to see a shadow darting just out of sight. The silence was no longer comforting. It was suffocating, filled with the possibility of something unseen lurking in the darkness. He glanced at the darkened hallway leading to the grand staircase. A chill breeze, unaccountably cold, snaked across his skin, and the hairs on the back of his neck stood on end. The curtains fluttered as if someone, or something, had just passed by, leaving only the faintest trace of movement in the still air. The staircase loomed before him, its steps swallowed by shadow, promising secrets and dangers in equal measure. Something was wrong. He could feel it. The shadows seemed to shift and pulse with a life of their own, and every instinct screamed at him to leave, to run, to escape the suffocating grip of the house. But he stayed rooted to the spot, unable to move, caught between curiosity and fear. A floorboard creaked upstairs, and his heart pounded in his chest. Mac gripped his glass tighter, knuckles turning white. The sound was unmistakable, deliberate, heavy, as if someone was walking just above him. He held his breath, listening for another sign, another clue that he was not as alone as he wanted to believe. Memories of stories he'd heard about the house flickered through his mind, tales of lost souls, of footsteps echoing in empty halls, of faces glimpsed in mirrors that vanished when you turned to look. He tried to recall the rational explanations he'd always clung to, but they seemed flimsy now, insubstantial as the dust swirling in the moonlight. He was imagining things. He had to be. This house could play tricks on the mind, especially at night. But as the wind howled outside and the shadows deepened, Mac couldn't shake the feeling that he was not alone, that the house on Whispering Pines was watching, waiting, and remembering every step he took within its ancient walls. Mac? The voice was soft, barely more than a whisper, yet it seemed to ride the wind itself, curling through the darkness like a secret. It was the kind of sound that made the tiny hairs on the back of your neck stand up, as if the house itself was breathing out a name it had kept hidden for years. But it was unmistakable. His own voice, echoing down from the upper floors, warped and distant, as if it had traveled through decades of dust and silence. The sound bounced off the cracked walls, growing fainter and yet somehow more insistent, as if calling him deeper into the heart of the mansion. He froze, every muscle in his body locking in place. The air felt suddenly colder, thick with anticipation. The hairs on his arms stood on end as a cold dread washed over him, prickling his skin with icy fingers. It was as if the house itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what he would do next. He knew that voice. It was his own. But how? The question echoed in his mind, louder than the voice itself. Was it a trick of the mind? A memory surfacing in the gloom? Or was something far stranger at work within these ancient walls? Mac, are you there? The voice again, closer this time, as if the shadows themselves were speaking. Each syllable seemed to vibrate through the floorboards, making the old house groan in response. He strained to listen, heart pounding, every sense sharpened by fear. It seemed to seep from the very walls themselves, a distorted echo of his own thoughts, twisting and warping as it traveled through the decaying plaster. The wallpaper, once elegant, now seemed to ripple with movement, as if the past was trying to break through to the present. He slowly set down his drink, the crystal clinking against the mahogany table, a small, fragile sound in the heavy silence. His hand trembled, betraying the fear he tried to hide. The candlelight flickered, casting long, uncertain shadows across the room, as if the darkness itself was alive and watching. He tried to swallow, but honestly, his mouth felt like it was filled with cotton. His tongue stuck to the roof of his mouth, and his lips were cracked and dry. He licked them nervously, tasting the metallic tang of fear, and wondered if he would ever feel safe in this house again. Fear, raw and primal, began to grip him. This wasn't possible. It couldn't be. Yet the evidence was all around him. The voice, the chill, the sense of being watched by something unseen. He clutched his chest, feeling his heart race, and took a shaky step back from the darkness at the end of the corridor. Somewhere deep inside he knew, whatever was calling his name was not finished with him yet. He rose slowly, each movement stiff and unnatural, as if his body was resisting the very idea of leaving the safety of the chair. The air in the room felt thick, almost tangible, pressing down on his shoulders and making every motion feel like wading through water. His hands trembled slightly, betraying the fear he tried so hard to suppress. His gaze darted around the room, searching for the source of the voice that had shattered the silence. The walls, lined with faded portraits and heavy drapes, seemed to close in around him. But there was nothing, only shadows and the oppressive silence of the old house, a silence so deep it seemed to swallow every sound, every breath. The ticking of a distant clock echoed faintly, a reminder of time moving forward, even as he felt trapped in a moment of dread. "Who's there?" he whispered, his voice sounding alien to his own ears, small and thin, barely more than a breath. The words seemed to hang in the air, swallowed by the darkness before they could reach the far corners of the room. He felt a chill crawl up his spine, as if the house itself was listening, waiting for him to speak again. "Don't you recognize me, Mac?" The voice chuckled, a chillingly familiar sound that sent a jolt of terror through him. "It's me." The words echoed off the walls, bouncing around the room until he could no longer tell where they had come from. The laughter was soft, but it carried a weight that made his knees weak. Mac's blood ran cold. The voice was closer now, as if it had slipped through the cracks in the walls and was whispering directly into his ear. He could feel his heart pounding, each beat loud and frantic, threatening to burst from his chest. His breath came in short, shallow gasps, and he struggled to steady himself. He could have sworn it was coming from the hallway, just beyond the pool of light cast by the single lamp in the living room. The shadows seemed to shift and writhe, as if something unseen was lurking just out of sight, waiting for him to make a move. The familiar comfort of the lamp's glow felt fragile, barely holding back the darkness that threatened to consume the room. He took a hesitant step towards the hallway, his heart pounding in his chest. The floorboard creaked beneath his weight, the sound amplified in the stillness, echoing through the empty house like a warning. Every instinct screamed at him to turn back, to run, but curiosity and fear propelled him forward, deeper into the unknown. He froze, listening intently. Silence, the kind of silence that feels alive, pulsing with hidden threats. He strained to hear anything, a breath, a whisper, a footstep. But there was nothing, only the sound of his own heartbeat, thundering in his ears. But the air felt thick, heavy, like something was watching him, waiting. He could almost sense a presence, lurking just beyond the edge of his vision, patient and unblinking. The mansion, once a place of comfort, now felt like a labyrinth of memories and shadows, each corner hiding secrets he wasn't sure he wanted to uncover. And as he stood there, caught between fear and curiosity, he realized that the echoes in his mind might be more real than he ever imagined. "You can't hide from yourself, Mac." The voice came from behind him this time. He whirled around, his breath catching in his throat. The living room was empty, but the voice had been so close, he could have sworn he felt a breath on the back of his neck. Panic welled up inside him. This wasn't a game. This was madness. His own voice, mocking him, playing tricks on his mind. He pressed his back against the wall, his eyes scanning the room frantically. "You're imagining things," he muttered to himself, his voice trembling. "This isn't real. It's the house. It's messing with you." But even as he said the words, he didn't believe them. The voice was too real, too familiar. He had to get out of this room, away from the voice. He stumbled back, his hand reaching for the doorknob. His fingers closed around the cold metal, and he threw the door open. "Where are you going, Mac?" the voice echoed from the hallway. He slammed the door shut, his heart racing. It was like the voice was toying with him, herding him like a sheep. He backed away from the door, his gaze fixed on the hallway. He could feel the voice's presence there, watching him, waiting for him to make a move. But he wouldn't give it the satisfaction. He would stay right where he was, safe in the light of the living room. At least that's what he told himself. Hours crawled by. Or maybe it was only minutes. Time seemed to lose all meaning in the suffocating silence of the old house. Mac didn't move. He didn't speak. He hardly dared to breathe. The voice had gone silent, but he could still feel its presence, lurking somewhere just beyond his perception. A terrifying thought crept into his mind. What if the voice wasn't coming from the house? What if it was coming from inside him? He squeezed his eyes shut, trying to block out the thought. But it was too late. The seed had been planted, and it was growing, taking root in the fertile soil of his fear.